Once again, welcome everybody to the CCLN monthly member meetup. Again, with the development of the vaccine, of a couple of vaccines that have been approved, we really wanted to get as much information out to our membership as possible. We opened this meeting up to everyone. It's not just a member meetup. Our whole community is interested in how things will roll out here in California. So we wanted to get this information out to our entire community. We have a great lineup for you today. We have Aaron Carruthers from the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, who also is serving on the California Community Vaccine Advisory Committee. We have Dr. Ruth Myers, who will tell us a little bit more about approved vaccines and how it impacts our populations. We have Kim Mills, a CCLN board member, who is going to talk about cultural considerations for the vaccine. Lynn Heitner from Strategies to Empower People will talk about one agency's development of vaccine strategy. And Camelia Houston from Alta will talk a little bit about the regional centers plan and what they're doing for vaccine. So with that, I will introduce our first panelist, Aaron Carruthers from the State Council on Disabilities. Really want to thank Aaron, one, for all his work on securing PPE for our community across the state. And on top of that now is working really hard to ensure that our community is placed in the highest of priorities as he sits on the California Community Vaccine Advisory Committee. So welcome, Aaron, and thank you for presenting today.
Mark, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation. Grateful to be here with each member on the community. Mark, I need to start off with an apology because I told you that I've got a big, giant, festive top hat with all of these like Christmas decorations that I wear to every staff holiday party. And there's no staff holiday party this year. Maybe you guys have figured out how to do it remotely. I'm not that creative. So I was going to wear it here with you all and just be in the festive mood. And I didn't get up into the rafters to get it this morning. So I was gonna be a little more festive for you, but thank you for.
I'm sure we could have all used that little comic relief, but we'll take you as you are. Thank you.
Well, at least you'll take me more seriously than with a giant hat with poinsettias and decorations hanging off of it. Well, hello everybody. I'm Aaron Carruthers. I'm the Executive Director of the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. I'm also a member of California's Community Vaccine Advisory Committee. I've just been so grateful and impressed by how much you all have done this year, how hard you've been working. I know I don't even know how you have energy to be upright right now with all that you have going on in your plates and the work that you're doing. I wanted to come and share with you what I've learned from the Community Vaccine Advisory Committee. I've got a little PowerPoint that I'll go through. There's a lot of other panelists, so I'll talk for a bit, share with you, and then we can open it up to questions and answers. And I've got an action item for you, for everybody if they want to get involved. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and get the PowerPoint going. So I want to start off today with a message of hope, and that message of hope comes from California's Surgeon General, Nadine Burke-Harris, who at one of our recent Community Vaccine Advisory Committees said there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So with that vaccine coming, being approved, the light has showed up. And what we're talking about now at the committee and what you and I all are talking about today is how do we get there from here? So the purpose of today is to talk about the Community Vaccine Advisory Committee, make sure you've got a direct connection for information from me as a member of that body, to give you information, but also for you to give me your thoughts, your questions, so I can take them back. I'm going to share with you what we know and what we don't know, but also then talk to you about some successes in advocacy. The Community Vaccine Advisory Committee was established by the Department of Public Health. It's one of 3 committees that they've set up regarding vaccines. One of them is a scientific safety review work group that started up in California, but then became a Western States collaborative, that coalition that includes Oregon and Washington and Nevada. The scientists from all those states are coming forward and together and working collaboratively to review the scientific information from the vaccines and what's coming out to make their own determination. And they have stated both Pfizer and Moderna they find to be safe. From that, there is the Community Vaccine Advisory Committee, and we're giving input and advice as to equity, safety, and transparency of the process. From that, both of those go over to the drafting guidelines work group that actually comes up with the how-tos and what goes into print for the Department of Public Health. So that's the structure of how the decisions are being made. There are 70 members of the Community Vaccine Advisory Committee, and 5 of them are representing disability and aging advocates. So the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, Disability Rights California, California Federation of Independent Living Centers, DREDF, and Justice in Aging. I'm grateful that they're all there, and we've all been working very well together and advocating for the same issues. Want to tell you what I've been advocating so far and what my focus has been from the first meeting. They set it up on the Monday before Thanksgiving. Our first meeting was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. The second meeting was the Monday after Thanksgiving. We have a meeting today, the day before Christmas Eve, so we're not stopping. My priorities so far have been that the vaccine needs to be a priority for people with intellectual, developmental, and other disabilities. So a named priority. We know that they've agreed that it will be a priority for those individuals who are living in congregate settings. It needs to also be a priority for people who are living in homes. They're just as impacted, just at risk from the effects of COVID.
Aaron,
the next priority
Aaron,
is...
may I just pause you for 1 minute? I think we're having a little bit of trouble with folks accessing the interpreter screen still.
It's fixed now. It's fixed now.
Oh, it's fixed now. Sorry. Okay, sorry, Aaron. Please continue.
Right. I'll keep going. The next priority that I have been focused on is that caregivers for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities need to be a priority. And that those caregivers need to be a priority whether they are paid or that work is being done unpaid, whether they're professional staff or their family staff. So the state needs to adopt the broadest definition of the term healthcare and healthcare workers. Next is that the vaccine has to be safe for people with complex medical conditions. We need to know that it's safe from interactions of other drugs, and informed consent is also a critical point. So this has been my initial priorities, but as we have been going through the meetings and rollout happens, there have been others that have come about. So as we know, the vaccines are approved. This slide was written and delivered on Friday last week, but it said that the FDA approved the Pfizer vaccine on December 11th. A week later, on the 18th, they approved the Moderna vaccine. So by the 18th, US had 2 approved vaccines. The doses coming into California, last week, California received 327,000 doses. By the end of this month, the end of December, California expects to have 2 million doses. By the end of next month, that's 4 million doses. And by the end of April, 20 million doses. So keep this slide in mind because the numbers of the doses coming into California plays out as we go through the conversation. So how the vaccines work, both vaccines use a genetic code to stimulate the immune system response, the mRNA. The sequence was designed on a computer. No cells were used in the creation, no stem cells or other cells were used in the creation of it. The vaccine is not, there's no live, attenuated, or inactive virus that's included in it. It's not a protein-based, it's not a DNA-based vaccine. It is a new, unique approach with this mRNA technology that gets our immune system to respond specifically to those little red spikes that come off of the virus. People have been interested in the ingredients. So there's the mRNA, there's lipids, and a proprietary blend from Pfizer in those lipids. There's also the solution that it's in includes a potassium chloride, a monobasic potassium phosphate, sodium chloride, dibasic sodium phosphate dihydrate, and sucrose. So that is the Pfizer vaccine plus the solution that it's in. For the Moderna vaccine, it also includes mRNA plus their proprietary lipid blend. And their solution that it's delivered in has less ingredients. It's a Treese buffer containing sucrose and sodium. I put up the ingredients because a lot of people in our community they know what they're allergic to, what they're reactive to, and seeing these ingredients are helpful to people to know whether or not there's something they need to avoid in one of the vaccines. I am not a scientist, so I asked the scientist, what do all these mean? And the answer was, they're mainly fats and sugars. So the ingredients of the vaccines are mainly fats and sugars. That sounds fantastic to me. Personally, all my 2020 has been about fats and sugars. It's the holiday season about fats and sugars. So this sounds okay to me. A lot of this about the vaccine you've seen in other forms, but they need to be shipped and stored in cold and ultra cold settings. The Pfizer vaccine is -70°C. So this is, as I understand, colder than winter in Antarctica. We've seen the special freezers being built. We've seen the runs on dry ice, and that's to ship and store the Pfizer vaccine. The Moderna vaccine is a little bit different. It's -20°, and my understanding is this is typical to other vaccines that need to be stored in cold settings. This is what the medical community will have to manage as they're administering the vaccine. We each need 2 doses for full immunity. So after the first dose, you have about 50% immunity. Then there's the second dose is considered a booster shot that gives us 95% immunity. You need them 21 to 28 days apart. Pfizer is about 21 days. Moderna is 28 days. And I've heard that if you got the Pfizer one on the 21st day, it could be the 21st, the 22nd, or 23rd. There's a little bit of a window in there. So it doesn't have to be exactly on the 21st day. If your first dose was the Pfizer vaccine, the second dose needs to be the Pfizer vaccine, and same for Moderna vaccine. It's not known if it prevents transmission. So there's things we don't know about it. We do not yet know whether the vaccinated people can spread the virus. I've heard this interpreted, people have described this to mean so they can spread the virus. And that is not, I understand it, an accurate interpretation of what this means. It just means that part wasn't studied. So we're all being advised to, even after we receive the vaccine, keep up with our good practices of washing our hands, wearing face masks, and staying 6 feet apart. So let's look a little bit into the Pfizer clinical trials. 40,000 trial participants, 10,000 of the trial participants were Latinx or Hispanic, 3,500 African American, and 1,600 Asian participants. The comorbidities that were included, that they know were included among the trial participants, included obesity, diabetes, respiratory, and cardiac illnesses. Based on this, the scientists have stated that they believe it is safe for different races and for different diseases. However, children were not included in the clinical trials, and the FDA only approved the Pfizer vaccine for people who are 16 years or older. Pfizer and Moderna have started, they plan to start, I don't know if they've actually started clinical trials on younger people, and they're taking them in 2-year cohorts working back from 16. So there'll be one for 14 and 15-year-olds and one for 12 and 13-year-olds. But at this point, it's not approved for people under 16 years old. The Pfizer side effects, it hurts. So injection site pain, fatigue, headache, and muscle pain. So pretty high numbers on these. And my understanding is that the side effects last for about 24 to 48 hours afterward. And it's greater, at least for the Pfizer one, after the second injection, more over the first one. They stated no anaphylactic or severe hypersensitivity reactions. No is a big word. It's an absolute word. We saw no reactions, and I'm digging more into this to learn more since it's such an important aspect for our community. So that's what we know about the vaccines. And now we get into the policy of getting out the vaccine. So we are, remember that chart with the 372,000 doses to California. So we're in a state of scarcity where there's just not enough supply to immunize all persons who are willing to accept the vaccine. So California has been in the process of crafting a policy that's fair, it's equitable, it's evidence-based, it's transparent, to prioritize who should be offered the vaccine initially, until the capacity to manufacture and administer the vaccine increases. So we are at a point where there is more demand than there is supply. There will come a point when there is enough supply for everybody, and these priorities and these tiers sort of fall away. The first, California set up a first tier priority, and in that tier there's a 1A and a 1B. And the 1A is healthcare workers. It's also people living in congregate settings, and of course the workers in those congregate settings, because they are the healthcare. California, society, the FDA have all agreed that healthcare workers are priority 1A because they play the role in keeping the rest of us healthy, both from COVID and other care needs due to other causes. We've advocated for a broader definition of a healthcare worker. And so success in that advocacy, we were successful. The language includes these phrases, which are important to our community. One is that Tier 1A includes workers who provide support to vulnerable populations to ensure their health and well-being, including, and this includes family care providers. So this is a big, broad statement. Vulnerable is the word that public health uses, not one I would have picked. But when you step out, they were very purposeful in saying, we're not going to pick job categories, we're not going to pick programs, but we're going to describe actions and activities. So in this, I've asked and I've clarified in conversations with the Department of Public Health, this means all regional center vendors. This means anybody who is paid or not paid for the work. This means if it's a professional staff or it's a if it's a family member who's giving the care. The answer has been yes, and I've responded, then you need to say so. I need to come out with it. So it's been a couple of weeks of me pushing on this piece because it is their decision. This is the decision they made. This is the policy that's set, but the communication needs to be better. It needs to be clear coming out from them. They've told me that something's going to come out from them by the end of this week. I reminded the end of this week is Christmas. They said they know. So I'll be monitoring to see what comes out today, tomorrow, or Friday, maybe Saturday on this. The other piece is that home health care and in-home supportive services. So these two descriptions combined really cover our care providers. Notice again, home health care and in-home supportive services are not capitalized. They're not talking about the programs formally. They're describing descriptions of work, even though the in-home supportive services is pretty directly linked to IHSS. The other piece that I and other disability and aging advocates have been pushing for is that advocating that people with IDD and other disabilities, along with older Californians, be included in Tier 1B. We've said that this can be done by simply stating any person receiving HCBS services are eligible. Now, our conversations at the Community Advisory Committee have been so far about Tier 1B. So Tier 1A is healthcare workers, Tier 1B is essential workers. And so they've said, Aaron, yeah, we know we got your request. We're still working on this definition of essential workers, but we're going to come back and talk about this other recommendation. So the recommendation is still actively being considered, and so in my mind, that's an advocacy opportunity that I want to tell you about in just a little bit. So distribution is being done by local county public health departments. They're going to administer for each county, and in all fairness to them, they're still figuring it out. First doses are coming in. They know where hospitals are. That's where they went. They have an institutional bias for healthcare that's being provided in a clinical setting, in a hospital setting, a congregate setting, something with walls around it that they can identify and point to. And they're going to have a tougher time figuring out how to identify people who are providing care in homes. So I've been talking with them to try to, what do you need? What do you need to get this and understand this? And they're just not there yet. So this leaves me with a lot of questions and a lot of concerns I still have, and the questions that I'm still raising with them, so you know what's on my mind in the advocacy, both in the conversations I have during the meeting, but also a lot of conversations and phone calls there's a coordinator for the committee that I talk with. There are representatives for other committees, the protocols and the science committee that I talk with. But how will public health recognize healthcare providers who work in homes rather than hospitals? How would someone come forward and you won't believe the answer so far. Aaron, well, it'll be on the honor system. I've heard this twice, and each time I've said that's wonderful. Wonderful to believe that's the way it'll work, but that's not how it'll work. And people need, local public health needs to clear instruction. Others coming to them need to be clearly identified or communicated. So they're still working through that piece. I've still been advocating whether or not vaccines can be done in home. There's a lot of risk for some people in just traveling out of home. Other people should have, their own may have sensory integration issues or other reasons that having the vaccine in as a familiar place as possible, not being triggered by a medical setting or people in gowns and masks, is what's going to work for them. I haven't had much success with this conversation, but I'm still on it. Big questions for me still about how safe is the vaccine. The safety question, we at our last meeting had about I asked for time on the last meeting's agenda to talk about the vaccine safety. Wonderfully, the Community Advisory Committee got the two representatives, California's two representatives on the FDA's ACIP Advisory Committee. So we've heard a lot about those committees in the last 2 weeks because they're the ones that had the final review and recommendation on Pfizer and Moderna. California has two representatives. They came to our last meeting and we had about a 20-25 minute conversation. It wasn't enough time. There was too much. And so I've asked for another meeting with the scientist, and I think that'll be a smaller group meeting, and that'll happen in January. So getting that set up. So if there's specific questions you want to make sure that we ask or get covered about the safety, let me know about that. Part of the safety is knowing whether or not there are interactions with other medications. So there's just so much that we don't know, and our community has every reason to have the phrase now. I don't know if you've heard it. The phrase is vaccine hesitancy. Well, yeah, we've got some vaccine hesitancy. I mean, part of our historical community trauma of medical experimentation leads us to have vaccine hesitancy. A new medication's released, and we're going to sit back and just wait and see how it plays out for other people before we jump in line first. We're not the only community. African American community has a very long history in this country of medical experimentation and misethics around that extended into the 70s. So the state overall has a lot to work on as they want to get to their goal of having 80 to 85% of Californians vaccinated. They want me as every member of the Community Advisory Committee should be some form of ambassador back to their communities about the vaccine. And I've told them the ambassador role that I'm willing to play is one where I'm conveying information. It's not my job to convince anybody, but to get information, get their questions, get answers, get good information, and get it back so people can make their own decisions about whether or not the vaccine is right for them. So those are some of the questions and concerns that I still have as of today. There's still a lot to work through. Next steps. So you have an opportunity for advocacy. And I encourage you, I'm going to send out a notice later today to all people, sort of an action alert, encouraging them to write to the Community Vaccine Advisory Committee. There is their email address there. And the deadline for letters from organizations will be Monday, January 4th by noon. The points you're wanting to make is that people with IDD and other disabilities should be priority 1B. Give examples of medical need why about the impact of COVID on people with IDD or other disabilities. You can say, the way you accomplish this is by making sure people with receiving HCBS services are priority 1B. And those are really, it doesn't have to be long, one page letter, just kind of getting it in. So if you take this and circulate it among all of you here, spread it far and wide, I'm going to get out an alert that says this too later today. I'll get it to Mark. I know he'll get it to all of you, and all of you can feel free to send it on as far as you like. I've got to tell you, the IDD community has done a wonderful job of advocating in this sphere. Like I said, I'm the only one of 70 people who are IDD specific. There are 5 of us, 7 of us who are, if I include aging, that are aging and disability. And at each of the meeting, they talk about what the public comments have been, and every single meeting, IDD community has been represented. So let's keep up that representation. My understanding and from internal conversations is this question about whether or not people with IDD or other disabilities should be priority 1B won't be made until sometime in January. They're still focusing on essential workers. They're still focusing on distribution and rollout. They're still incorporating the Moderna information. So that's why I think there's time to get these letters in. It's a week and a half. It's not much time. And it's also during holidays, so that's very difficult. But if these are just the key points you need to make. So with that, I'd like to pause and hear from you. We're gathering information from people. I'm doing it through, I held 4 community sessions last week. We have a survey that's out. Happy to talk to any group to share what I know if you find it helpful. But now I really just want to pause and either Mark, if you want to have an open discussion or answer questions, I can be on till noon today.
I just want to be conscious of interpreters. So folks should be able to see the interpreter and maybe me right now. Aaron, thank you so much. So much information to absorb. You know, we are so appreciative to have you sitting at that table representing our community. One of our first concerns when we saw the list was that we didn't feel like there was a lot. So we were really grateful to see you sitting on that committee. I think what we're hearing from a lot of our providers is the need for like a statewide plan for our workforce. Each individual provider right now is frantically reaching out to their public health departments to either register or discuss what kind of verification they need that their employees are a home health care worker. I know that our listserv has just been blowing up, our email listserv from our members, really asking, you know, is there a form letter? Is there certain language that we should be using when we're communicating with our individual public health departments? And I just think they're so frantic to ensure that their workforce is safe and that the people that they're serving are safe. As we see our numbers spike and know the severe to fatal outcomes for the population that we're serving, there's a real urgency from the in-person services that are still happening right now in our community. Do you have, you know, of course we'll get out the link to send letters to the committee to advocate for our community, but do you have any advice on language that providers can be using? Form letters, verification that they are an in-home service worker. Any advice on that would be great.
Yeah, I think that, Mark, it's such an important point because now that there's 2 pieces to this process. One is setting the policy and the other one is administering it. So we've got the policy set. Now, how do people actually make good on it when they go to their well, I was going to say county public health, but county public health determines and decides where in the county it's being administered. So it may be in a hospital, maybe in a clinical setting, it may be directly from public health, just depends upon the county and what their decisions are based on how their best knowledge of the community. That's why I pushed on the State Department of Public Health to put out clear language and clear wording that we can then take and share. So I have, again, if it comes out this week, my plan is to take it, grab it, put it on letterhead and say, here you go. This is the language. I also have been and sharing what I'm learning with Nancy over at the department so that she can exercise whatever it is she'd like to exercise in her leadership capacity. I've also been sharing with Amy Wessling over at ARCA and some regional centers directly what I'm learning. Because you're right, it needs a bit more of a response than just each single provider having to go and have that conversation or renegotiate it. At the same time, that may be what it takes to figure it out initially. It's going to be clunky. It's going to be clunky. But I haven't heard so far that anybody has said, I went to my department and I went to my public health department and they said, go, I don't know what you're talking about, or go away. I've heard that they've said, oh, okay, let's figure this out. So the openness and willingness, I think, is important. Is that helpful, Mark?
It is. I think we are hearing from some counties, from some providers, that some counties are saying we don't know what you're talking about. So again, that messaging out at a statewide level for a statewide plan, I think is really important. Just so that the folks on this call know too, Jackie Dillard-Foss, one of our board members and executive director of STEP, sent an urgent email to DDS. Nancy replied and added Catherine Blakemore on. I think we need to add Erin Carruthers on and Amy Wessling on from the Association of Regional Centers so that we can kind of coordinate our efforts on how this messaging can be consistent across all the counties. Members, please know that we're certainly raising the flag and increasing the urgency at a state level for the providers of in-person services to be prioritized for this vaccine. We're really doing the best we can and knocking doors down and banging doors down to make sure that we get there. So hopefully, as Aaron said, it will be clunky, but hopefully with time and advocacy, it will smooth out for our network of providers. So with that, I'll turn it over to other questions for Aaron before he has to go in about 20 minutes. There are two ways that you can ask questions. You can post them into the chat feature, or you can raise your hand. I see two hands raised already. One is Tony Fong. Tony Fong, do you have a question that you'd like to ask? You want to turn your camera on, Tony?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
All we see is superheroes right now, Tony. Can you turn your camera on? There's a small video icon down on the bottom left hand of your screen. If you can click on that, it will open up your video camera.
Do I have Papa? Papa? No. No, Papa.
Tony, we still can't see you.
No.
Hey, Mark, in the chat, Elizabeth says she's not sure if people have the ability to turn their cameras off and on.
Gotcha.
No.
Jessica, can you see if we can give permission to questions? And I'm gonna, while we work on that, let me go to Connie Lapin, who has her hand up. Connie, can we unmute you?
Yes, I couldn't find how to get the video on. This is amazing. I'm just briefly, I'm making a point, and then I'm sure you made that point, Aaron, is the institutional bias of congregate settings. And we know supported living is taking people out of the DCs. And I don't know if you need to re-emphasize that we've closed our DCs and now we're being, it's almost like we're being discriminated against because we're doing the right thing. I know you know that, but we can't forget that. And that's just recently. And if you do have a committee, I would love to see an organization of families and consumers on that too, that are meeting with Nancy. I'm involved with Disability Voices United, and we would like to have the perspective of consumers and families, although you all do. That's who we represent. But it's kind of ironic that we don't, that we are penalized because we're not a facility. And somehow we have to make that humanly.
And that's the word used.
Yeah, humanly understandable, because that's what they want to know: what facility and what's your license number.
Yeah, Connie, you're absolutely right. Completely agree.
So, sorry, I am just trying to work on videos for folks using ASL. Thank you, Connie, for that comment. I see that Elizabeth Jackson has her hand raised while we continue to work on video. Elizabeth, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, actually, it's from the chat box from Leah. And she was asking, will we have the choice which vaccine to get, Pfizer, Moderna, and if at all?
Yeah, great question, Leah and Elizabeth. Thank you for echoing Leah's question out of the chat. If you have a reason that you'd want one version over the other, that would be something you'd want to talk to with your doctor or healthcare provider about. Again, I put the ingredients up there in case there are ingredients in there that have allergies to or reactions to, or avoiding for whatever reasons. So if you have a reason, talk there. I don't know what that will do to impact your ability. I don't know what the answer will be when you do it, but that really is a person to healthcare provider conversation is what I'd recommend.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I can jump, Mark. I can jump to the other questions in the chat.
That would be great. Thanks.
Sure. Marie asks, how will this vaccine affect women's reproductive systems? Will it make us infertile? Marie, I haven't heard anything about this. Have you heard something about this?
I believe Maria is also using ASL. If you could type, oh, Maria has, yes, I have a recent article.
Okay, well, I'll look into that and follow up with that with the scientists when we have a conversation about medical safety. Thank you for raising it.
We also have Dr. Ruth Myers up next. So we'll just take a few more questions and she may be able to get into a little bit more detail, but she's posted in the chat that it does not affect fertility.
Great, thank you, Dr. Myers.
There's also a few questions from Lori that I think may be better directed towards Dr. Ruth Myers. So while Jessica continues to work on giving folks who are using ASL privileges to show their video, let's jump to Dr. Ruth Myers' presentation while we continue to work on that. So please bear with us, folks. We're working on giving you video privileges. I see maybe one more question. As Aaron said, this will be clunky. In that spirit, we each need to advocate for the people we support and our caregivers by convincing the county distributors that we are on the front lines of exposed care. Be clear that we cannot quarantine nor shelter in place, that we work in a congregate setting by the mere fact that we offer 24/7 care with many caregivers. Okay, and I see that Tony has been promoted to be able to share your video. Tony, do you want to try one more time before we move to our next presenter to share your screen? I don't think that's happening. So let's do that. While we continue to work on this, let's move to Dr. Ruth Myers. Aaron, I can't thank you enough for your presentation. So much information, and we'll look forward to more to come from you that we'll send out to our members. So thank you. And next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Ruth Myers. Ruth works very closely with an agency up in Sacramento called Strategies to Empower People, and has just been an amazing support to the California Community Living Network with her knowledge and expertise. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Ruth Myers. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for letting me be involved in this activity. I just am so filled, just like Aaron was saying. I just can't believe I get to be in the same atmosphere as the enormously heroic people that are doing the work in California. I, in addition to getting to work with STEP, I get to work in several other parts of California as well. And the devotion and heroism of people that are really doing the in-person work is something you just don't see every place else. I poke my nose into all kinds of medical business in a number of other places beyond California, and I have immense admiration for how people have operated in California. I also have immense admiration for Aaron Carruthers' ability to present pretty complicated medical information. So I was going to talk about some of the same stuff, but I will do it very quickly because I think that the way Aaron presented it is as good as it could be. With that, I want to talk a little bit about kind of the history of immunizations, just a very brief bit, and how we got around to the two that are currently approved and what the science seems to suggest about them. Some of you may have seen some of these old pictures. These are people lining up for the smallpox vaccine right around World War I. And the vaccine in those days, and some of us still have smallpox scars on our shoulders, is that they scraped off some skin and put some cowpox pus on it. And that's how you got immunized against smallpox. Fairly frightening sounding and looking procedure, but smallpox was wiping out enormous numbers of people at that time, and people were only too willing to queue up for it. This was what was going on when people got very motivated to think about a vaccine for polio. These are what were vast numbers of people in iron lungs from being infected with polio. Again, this was so screamingly apparent and affecting everybody in everyday life. People were extremely willing to move forward and get those vaccinations. And there were two very popular ones. One was a killed vaccine. So it was polio virus that was killed. And another one was a live attenuated virus, which was polio virus that had been altered so that it was not supposed to be able to produce an active infection. Much riskier than the messenger RNA vaccine that we're looking at today. And this is just a scene from the influenza in 1917-18. And this particular influenza selectively, of all the people that contracted this flu, it killed more people in their 20s and 30s than proportionally people that were older or younger that got this virus. And some people believe that the fact that the US president was sick with this virus was the reason that the settlement at the end of World War I was so flawed. He was too sick to really make it a better settlement. And this is a picture that dates back to when Lynn Heitner and I were of a certain age. I actually had rubella, but she has a great story about lining up for a rubella vaccine where all they did was basically round up people, little kids, and all you could hear was how people were reacting to this vaccination they knew nothing about. And Lynn explains that better. For those epidemics, rubella, the flu, nobody questioned the need for treatment and prevention. Why is there so much more hesitation now? And I think we could probably debate this for the rest of the decade, but there's still too many people that still don't think COVID-19 is a real illness or a serious illness. And unfortunately, in this day and age, there's still too many people that don't care about a disease that mostly kills people who are older and people with disabilities. And conspiracy theories and lies get a lot more airtime than pure science, and they're a lot more seductive. Everybody's seen this picture, the micrograph of the COVID virus, and those red things are the focus, aren't they, of this messenger RNA vaccine. As you all know, people with IDD are more likely to die from COVID-19 than age-matched others, even if they have no other health issue. There's still no consistently effective treatment, and people of all ages and all health statuses are still dying from this disease, and it is much more lethal in various ways than the flu. One of the things I keep hearing is, well, it's just like the flu, isn't it? And the answer is, no, that's not correct. Usually people die from lung problems. If they're going to die from this virus, they also die from many other complications of COVID, including neurological and cardiac, among others. The thing that I think we all must keep in mind is that if a disease causes people to lose their sense of taste or smell, which is one of the ways it presents, that means it can attack brain tissue, nerve tissue. I think it's also interesting that people have been studying coronaviruses since the 1930s. The virus got into humans in China from a cow in a market in China. And still, the best way to prevent death from this virus is to prevent people from getting it. So there's all kinds of vaccines that have been investigated. The two that are approved are messenger RNA viruses. The other viruses or the other vaccines are what's called vectored, live attenuated, inactive, or modified toxin. And I already talked about the examples of the polio virus that was both live attenuated and dead virus. A modified toxin is the kind of vaccination you get when you get a tetanus shot. I think it's important to note that although the application here seems like it's a relatively new use of messenger RNA. Messenger RNA has been a subject of medical research for at least since the 1970s. And it's already in use in a number of medical applications. Some of you have known people that had what seemed to be incurable lung cancer that got many, many more years of life. And it's because of messenger RNA technology. What the messenger RNA does for both the current vaccines is that it takes a little bit of the code from the spikes of the coronavirus, and it tells your immune system to create antibodies that destroy those spikes. Because it doesn't include any of the virus itself, it can't cause an infection with the virus. A vectored vaccine, which are some of the ones that have not yet been approved, is where a non-infectious bit of the virus, but enough to activate your immune system, is attached to another virus that's already easily grown and always triggers an immune response. Big problem with that is that they're using a lot of viruses that people may already have an immunity to. So if you get a Trojan horse vaccination using a cold virus and you've already had that cold, you are going to kill the vaccination before it has a chance. So the Pfizer vaccine, just as Aaron said, there's no virus in it. It's just a messenger that's the spike protein on the outside of the virus. There's no stem cells, there's no proteins, there's no DNA. And it's currently only approved for people age 16 and older. Now, when people say, well, what do you mean we don't know if it prevents transmission? They're specifically talking about the situation where a person on their skin, in their breath, in their membranes is contaminated with active virus from some other place. You know, somebody breathed it on them or they touched something that had active virus on it. It's not known if that person can transmit virus they've been contaminated with. it will prevent them from getting the virus from infecting them, but it is unknown if that will prevent them from spreading it from their contaminated hands or secretions. So this is the other ingredients, just like you talked about: fat, salt, and sugar. And this is all the long names. The Moderna vaccine, again, all the same stuff as the Pfizer vaccine. No protein, no stem cells, a little bit different storage, slightly different immunization plan. This is only approved for people ages 18 and older. And again, it's not known if a person who's been vaccinated can still spread the virus from contaminated hands or secretions. The other ingredients in Moderna, just as Aaron said, it's a shorter list: fats, vinegar, and sugar, rather than fat, salt, and sugar. So far, I know it's a terrible slide. Swine flu vaccine. Yeah, okay, sorry, couldn't help myself. The side effects typically are, just as Aaron said, 24 to 48 hours of your immune system letting everybody know that, yes, we're on the job. Of course, there's always a theoretical possibility that somebody will be allergic to some component, which is why the companies are being so much more transparent in terms of saying, yeah, this is what we suspend the vaccine in. I think one of the issues that Aaron alluded to, is captured, of course, in Elizabeth Warren's famous quote: "If you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu." I think people understandably are concerned that people with disabilities were not specifically included in the vaccine trials. However, they did include people of a wide variety of ethnicities, and they did include people with a wide variety of other health issues that confer a similar level of medical vulnerability as is conferred by the presence of an intellectual or developmental disability. In a way, it's paradoxical, but reasonable that they are more and more concerned about consent issues, which sometimes leads to an inadvertent exclusion. Thanks to advocates in California, people who provide in-person services to vulnerable individuals are considered the highest priority. And thanks to Lynn, we have at least one effective step-by-step mechanism for delivery, and Lynn's going to talk about that in just a couple of minutes. And in case you were wondering, UC Davis and several other test sites are publishing lists like this. The vaccine cannot give you an infection with COVID-19. If you are exposed at the time you get the vaccine or in between the injections, you are still vulnerable to get sick with COVID-19, but it is not a result of having the vaccination. The vaccination does not cause you to have a positive test for COVID-19. Some people say, well, how'd they get it done so fast? Doesn't this usually take years? And in fact, it does. But the way they did this, the way they fast-tracked this, was they gathered all the usual numbers of data, but instead of waiting until every set of data had been fully collected, they reviewed every set of data as it was collected, so that they didn't have to wait until the entire set of evidence was collated and gathered together, and then start then to review everything. There's no government mandate to get a vaccine. The vaccine cannot alter your personal DNA. The vaccine does not alter fertility. Vaccine immunity right now is safer than natural immunity. The immunity you get by having COVID-19 does not appear to be sustained. And it does appear to be associated with a chronic active form of the disease, which can cause significant increases in disability and symptoms for weeks or months. And of course, somebody had to suggest this as a possibility, but there's no microchip or tracking device or surveillance device attached to the vaccination. There's several other vaccines in development. Oddly, these are less safe, just on first blush, than the ones that are currently approved. So you want to score some flu shots? Sorry, another terrible slide. We have some pretty good evidence, pretty encouraging evidence that this vaccination may be a very helpful thing to do. But as Erin pointed out, and as others have pointed out, like these two math guys, okay, we got vaccine, we have doses, then a miracle occurs and people can receive the vaccination. I think you should be a little bit more specific here in step 2. Well, step 2, then a miracle occurs, is one of the many amazing things that Lynn Heitner's been able to accomplish. And so I'm very delighted to see her on our panel today to talk in step-by-step detail how she's getting it done. Thank you again for letting me visit with you, and please accept my warmest appreciation and admiration.
Thanks so much, Ruth. Really appreciate your participation in our event today. If I can keep you for a little longer,
Of
there
course.
are questions that I think would best be directed towards you. And although we don't expect you to have all the answers, I will pose them to you. But remember, folks, you can also raise your hand to ask a question, put it in chat, or put it in the Q&A. So Lori Shepard has sent in a number of questions that I think are best directed towards you, Ruth. So if a person had COVID or tested positive for antibodies, what is the recommendation around getting the vaccine?
That is still not a definite recommendation. The science is leaning both ways. Some scientists are saying the vaccination will give you better immunity, even if you've had the disease, because the natural immunity is not sustained. So we don't know yet. Sorry to say. Sorry.
That's an okay response, I think. Thank you. We're still learning as we go along here.
So
right?
true.
Next question, what is the window of time for the second vaccine? I know we're hearing 21 days, but is it only 21, or is it 21 to 28, or 18 to 25, or is it exactly on the 21st day?
For the Pfizer vaccine, it's 21. For the Moderna vaccine, it's 28. Most of the people that have been doing the trials say one day either way probably won't make a big difference, but they just can't be as encouraging if people don't follow the protocol.
Thank you. And then a follow-up to that question, if a person misses the window for the second dose, is there any sort of procedure to follow for that?
To get the second dose when they can, and then be reevaluated for their immunity to see if it took. It's analogous. Some of you probably remember those 2 or 3 shot hepatitis vaccines. And if people, even if they had the vaccine and followed it properly, they still, wanted to check sometime later to see if the person was still immune.
Thank you. And another question. If you're not feeling well, if you're feeling under the weather, unsure of why, should you go get the vaccine? And
No.
same as the second dose?
No, well, you should, if you're already in the vaccine, you've already had your first dose, you should get the second dose on time. However, if you're sick and it's time for you to have get your vaccine, it should be delayed until your immune system is not fighting whatever it is and is available to make good use of the vaccine.
And you may have covered this, but I'm going to ask it because it's on this list of questions. How many
Good.
known strains are there? And how many are covered in the two most widely talked about vaccines?
That is a fabulous question. It's part of what I think was really creative science that went into creating these two vaccines, is that instead of trying to choose one of the COVID strains and guess that that would be the most important one, instead they chose a vital accessory of how the vaccine is coded with the spike proteins. And the structure of the spike proteins is very similar regardless of which strain of COVID-19 that you have. So the belief hasn't, we don't have a million points of data yet. And I wish I could include myself in the royal we of people who created these vaccines. I'm just a observing scientist, but the spike proteins are so consistent between the different strains that it's believed that these mRNA vaccines will still be effective, even, for example, for the apparently more contagious strain that's come over from the UK.
Thank you. Another question. We've seen some data with regards to certain individuals that may have some sort of allergic reaction. What is recommended if one of the people that we serve is getting the vaccine? We know that they'll be given at pharmacies, and is that advised for someone who may have a history of allergic reactions, or should they be in a more of a medical setting when they get the vaccine in case of allergic reaction?
You just said the solution, which is that if a person has a history of allergic reactions, that they should be in a more monitored situation when they get the vaccine.
So don't go to your local CVS or not your local pharmacy, that should be done at your doctor's office.
Yeah, I'm allergy girl myself, and that's where when I get this thing, I'll be getting it with people nearby that can help me if I have an allergic reaction.
Mm-hmm. Any other recommendations besides social distancing, wearing masks, other ways to protect ourselves from the virus and improve our antibodies?
Cleaning things that you probably don't need to clean is probably a good idea. People kind of, curl their lip a little when we talk about spraying our grocery bags and things like that. Or when things are delivered, not touching them for 24 hours and like that. There's something about the way this thing is transmitted that is not entirely clear yet. And so even precautions that seem silly are worth considering. That's what people way smarter than I am are saying when they talk amongst themselves.
Thank you. I see Connie Lapin has her hand raised. Connie, can you unmute to ask Dr. Ruth a question?
I'm sorry, it didn't pop up. Ruth, you're awesome. You're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, that was the.
Am I still on?
You are, Connie. Go ahead.
I just got bumped up. I just want to know about the new strain that we're hearing about from England. And I know that you can't give us a definitive answer, but it's I'm hearing, it probably would cover it, probably.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, they're saying with the new strain that the virus itself is nastier in terms of it's more infectious and makes more people sick. However, they're also saying that the spike protein, which is what these mRNA vaccines are directed at, they're saying that the spike protein is so similar to the spike protein on the strains we've been working on here, that it is expected that this vaccination will help. And the vaccination has been rolled out in the UK for a while. And so far, you know, hoping, it seems to be managing well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this again, Mark.
Oh, thanks.
So good.
Thank you, Connie. It was impromptu, but timely. If there are no other questions for Dr. Ruth, we will move on to our next presenter, but feel free to continue.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth. You've just been such an invaluable resource for us throughout this public health crisis. So
Oh my gosh, thank you.
we will continue to reach out to you, I'm sure. Thank you. Wonderful. So our next panelist is Kim Mills, a board member of the California Community Living Network, as well as running her own agency in the San Diego area, A Better Life Together. And Kim is going to talk to us a little bit about cultural considerations as it applies to the vaccine. Both Aaron and Dr. Ruth touched on this, but Kim's going to engage us in a little discussion about that. So welcome, Kim, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. I just need to start the slideshow. Here we go. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity just to be invited to be a part of the panel. I am excited excited about the possibility that this COVID pandemic will be coming to a close, but also concerned about everybody's response and that everybody's tired. We're tired, COVID fatigue. But I want to just talk a little bit about just cultural considerations about the vaccine and just to remind us as a community that everybody's not as excited to jump to get it. So I just wanted to talk about that for a little bit and maybe share some recommendations for how we can have safe conversations with people that we support and staff that are in our agencies so that everybody still feels a part of the community, whether they choose to get vaccinated or not. So the purpose of what I wanted to talk about was just talk about the cultural implications. There's some alarming numbers in the of various Black and Brown communities regarding COVID, the deaths that are related to those that have caught it, and possible barriers to getting vaccines, reasons why people may not choose to get vaccinated, and then our response, again, in general as a community for how we're going to be person-centered and inclusive for those who maybe don't want to get the vaccine or are afraid of it. So yeah, just some stats. It's African-American community, we are contracting at higher rates. We are likely to die from it more at a larger number than whites. The infection rate are 3 times higher, and the death rates are 6 times higher than whites. In the Latinx community, we are also disproportionately impacted. Latinx represents 70% of all COVID deaths in the age group of 18 to 59, and that makes up just 43% of the population. Other historically marginalized communities, such as American Indians, have also experienced alarming rates of COVID-19. Hospitalization rates are 5 times higher for American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Blacks, and 4 times higher for Latinx compared to non-whites. Latinx community between 40 and 59 years of age have been affected 5 times as compared to whites. Latinx deaths showed individuals younger than 60 compared to whites, showing 6% of the population were under 60 who died. Some reasons could be multi-generational households that are common amongst minority populations, resulting in a lot of people within various generations of those particular families contracting it. This is from DDS. The numbers are currently those that are positive. Asian community 241, African Americans 452 individuals, Hispanic 2,557. There's a other category. I'm still not quite sure what other encompasses. Hopefully that we'll get some specific cultures in there, not just lump everybody into another category. But there's over 2,300, and the white community also 2,200 individuals that are positive as of December 15th. So you can see it's a larger number of individuals who are non-white that have tested positive. And this is not just symptomatic of California. This is all over the world. So in terms of vaccine response, although COVID has killed or hospitalized Black, Hispanic, or Native Americans at a far higher rate than white Americans, while 53% of white Americans said they would get vaccinated, compared to 24% of Blacks and 34% of Hispanics. So even though the numbers are high in those communities, there's still some reluctance to get vaccinated. Within the African American community, there's history of African Americans, slaves, Black African Americans being research subjects. Not just Tuskegee, but well before Tuskegee, lots and lots of experiments were being done on slaves. And so throughout our history, there is a distrust to the government, distrust to healthcare officials. Just growing up in an African American home, I remember my dad having this even going to the doctor, don't tell the doctor everything. And so there was this culture within our own family about don't tell everything that's going on. You can't trust everything that the doctor says. And so you have that amongst some African Americans. Now, I want to be cautious to say that we can't paint everybody with a broad brush, and that's what happens a lot. And when dealing with cultures, not every African American is against the vaccine. Not every African American is concerned about COVID. Not every African American is going to be jump in line to get it. We have to just talk with people individually. I mean, we're an awesome community that focuses on person-centered, and in this case, we have to continue to be person-centered in our communications and our messaging. I was on a DS task force call last week, and the conversation was talking about the vaccine and when can we get it. And it's great that we have so many great advocates that are ensuring that we are considered in the first run. And I remember looking at some of the comments in the chat box, and one provider was, I just can't wait for me to get all of my people vaccinated. And I thought, wow, are they going to have a choice? They might have some concerns. Are they going to be pressured? So I just want us to, as a community, to make sure that we are considering the cultural aspect of individuals' choice to get the vaccine or not. There's lots of different aspects or views of health related to culture. Some might think it's God, their spiritual life. God's allowing this, and so God's a healer. And so we have to just be open to different views on medicine, different views on this vaccine, different views on how an individual takes care of their health. There's a whole movement about healthy lifestyle and the whole preventative nature of this. And so if I just take these different supplements, I can just be healthy and I won't get it. So you have people who really believe that. And I think as a community, we have to be okay with their choice not to get the vaccine and not pressure anyone to get it, and not discriminate against them if they choose not to. I've just had a recent conversation with some other providers about how do we as a community handle this if you have a staff that doesn't get it. Not that it would be anyone else's business if they didn't. How are we going to handle that? And our response was, well, everybody should continue to wear their masks and practice safe distancing so people aren't singled out and people aren't discriminated against. Just like if a a person needed support, chose not to get the vaccine, they shouldn't be denied services. We should just treat everyone the same. And so I just want us to all be aware of those nuances. Things to consider: messaging, creating a safe pace. Thank you so much, CCLN and Mark, for putting this together so quickly, but just creating a safe place to have these kind of conversations. So it can't be, hurry up, let's go ahead and get in line and get everybody vaccinated. Let's start talking about it and be okay with people saying, I don't trust it, or I don't know if this is a good idea, and I hear what the science is saying, but I don't want to get it. And people should be okay not getting it. Try to include families in those conversations. So in various cultures, the family dynamic it's really about the family and their influence. And so you might ask one individual, are they going to get it? And they may say yes or no, but have you considered talking with them, with their family members, or getting input from them about, hey, how does your parents feel about it? Because it is in cultures, the family is the most important aspect. It's not the individual. So someone may be against it because their grandmother or grandfather said, no, we're not going to get it. So be open to that possibility. I mentioned not shaming people for deciding not to get the vaccine, not putting any pressure either way. I had a conversation with a person that I support. She's 74, and she's not African American or Hispanic. And she said, I got a letter from my doctor saying that I need to get it in April. And I said, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. You don't feel, she says, I'm not sure if I trust it or not. And I said, that's your choice. Are you going to get it? She said. I said, well, I haven't decided yet. And so just having those open conversations about it, and people are concerned about it. I'm not saying to turn anybody against it or to dissuade. I just want to be cautious that we are being person-centered in this approach. And I get everybody is tired of COVID and this pandemic and how it has uprooted all of our lives. Just want to make sure that we are being considerate of everyone. I mentioned it before, not assuming that people won't get the vaccine. My example of the African American community, yes, there's a lot of people who are not excited about it and are just going to wait and see. But there are some people who are going to get it. I mean, we saw even on the news, the first person to get it was an African American nurse, and the African American doctor was a part of the group that developed it. And so there seems to be a whole marketing campaign for the African American community to say, hey, it's safe. Even a Black nurse got it. And so just being open to, we just need to be open to the fact that everybody's going to have a different response to this and a different reaction to it and different plans. I talked about it before, helping employees and people supported by explaining the benefits and risks. So these are things that as a community, we can do. Just being able to just answer questions. We are not, my agency, we're not going to try to sway people either way. Here's some information. We encourage you to talk to your healthcare professional. We're not going to take a position either way, and nor think it's our place to do that. Again, I talked about developing policies within our agency so that people don't feel singled out. And again, make sure we're approaching this with a person-centered approach, as we do with everything in life. Any questions for me? That's my.
Kim, thank you so much. Thank
You're
you
welcome.
so much. I mean, this was such a critical piece to add to this event. I think these discussions are so important. There's a lot of fear out there, and we need to acknowledge that. There's fear from our history with vaccinations and diseases here in the United States. There's fear from anti-vaxxers who believe that vaccines cause autism, who have a firm belief in that. It's important to highlight that the vaccines are 95% effective.
Absolutely.
Not 100%. I think that we will find ourselves adhering to these recommendations for longer than just getting a shot in your arm and thinking that it's over. I think that we'll find ourselves in masks and socially distancing for a long, long time until we reach that herd immunity.
Absolutely.
Here in the United States. So you just raised such important points for all of us to be thinking about around how an employer providing services to people with developmental disabilities, schedule their staff, hire their staff, train their staff, how we educate the people that we serve is going to be so critical as well. And, you know, we may have somebody that we serve who is incredibly medically fragile. And we'll choose not to maybe put a staff person to work in that home if that staff person hasn't had the vaccine. So, I mean, there are those kinds of decisions that can be made at an agency level. So when you talk about agency policies, I find that to be just a real point where folks can do a deeper dive into how they're going to manage this ongoing issue that's going to be with us long after we get a shot in our arm and a vaccine.
Absolutely, Mark. You hear so many stories. I've heard a few of employers forcing their employees to get the vaccine. And I thought, oh, how horrible to force someone to do something that they don't want to do. So as a community, I don't think anyone is even in that vein of forcing anybody to do anything against their will. And so creating that environment where everybody feels accepted and okay is important.
Super important. Again, if folks want to make comments, ask questions, feel free to raise your hand, post a question about this particular presentation or topic in the chat, or use the Q&A feature. I see that there are there's a big thank you here, Kim. Absolutely agreement. We offer information and let everyone, employers and people we support, know whatever decision they make is the right decision for them. Another comment was about requiring employees and people served to get the vaccine. Another comment, they will also be incurring any liability if anything should occur as a result of the vaccine. You know, I mean, so there's just so much to unpack here, right? As an individual, as a service provider, as a person looking for services. We're not done with this discussion, and it's something that's going to be ongoing for a long time.
Awesome. Thank you for putting this together, Mark and Jackie. It's needed for us. I mean, because we're all tired. It's the end of the year. Let's just be done with it. The vaccine is here. Everybody just get it. And everybody doesn't want to get it. Everybody's afraid of it. And yes, we're just exhausted. But let's just pause and consider and have conversations. So
be mindful, be thoughtful, and be person-centered, like you've driven home many times throughout your presentation. So, wow, thanks so much, Kim.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And with that, we're now going to hear from Lynn Heitner, who is from Strategies to Empower People up in Sacramento, and the extraordinary efforts that agency has made to develop their vaccine strategy. This will be helpful for providers to think about what they're doing to prepare for the vaccine, as well as help them in their planning process for how to plan for the vaccine strategy within their agency. So with that, I will welcome Lynn Heitner and take it away, Lynn.
Well, thank you for including me in this, Mark, really. And I'm grateful to share anything that I've learned. And that's kind of what started the whole thing for us here at STEP. I am so fortunate that here at STEP, we have always had the culture that we are going to be transparent with our consumers, with their families, with our employees. If we know something, we're going to share that with everybody. So everybody's on the same page. And of course, we want everybody to have as much information to make informed or supported decision-making about whether this is something that they want to do or they don't want to do. So, I'll kind of take you through the process of how things we've all been reading everything ferociously for the longest time about when's the vaccine coming, when's it coming? And then somewhere around the late October, I'm sure many of you got the same email message from Health and Human Services saying, click this link, please go over and take this CDC survey, which was very interesting because I went there and the CDC asked, what's the name of your agency? What do you do? And how many how many employees do you have and how many consumers do you have? And do you have a pharmacy that you would prefer using? If you don't choose one, by default, you're going to be assigned to Walgreens or CVS. And STEP, thankfully, has had a relationship with Safeway pharmacies, Safeway Albertson pharmacies for many years. They're the ones that coordinate with us every fall for our flu vaccination clinics. And so I reached out to them immediately, my contacts at corporate, and I said, hey, the CDC is asking me about, do we have a preference for dispensing our vaccines? Is Safeway geared up to do that? Where are they in this process? And they said, absolutely, we've already been approved to receive the vaccine. We already have the storage things, and they have a whole plan, a program designed just like we do have program designs. And so sent that information off. Jackie has been going to several meetings and gathering information, which we all read and go through, and then me and Ruth get together and we make our plans. And so it was like, well, we need to kind of start poking people, because the plan is out from the governor and public health about, the hierarchy and the different tiers and everything. And so we hear that we're in this tier, but we haven't been notified of anything. So, we're out here in community services where we're the last ones to hear anything about us, and so we kind of have to, we're used to rattling cages, and STEP's here in Sacramento, right? So we've always felt this kind of right and responsibility to get in there down at the state capitol and fight for people with disabilities, and then spread that information out to the community, because it doesn't really connect sometimes. So we're kind of in a holding pattern, just like everybody else. I've given Safeway the information that they've wanted, which was, since public health in each county is going to be releasing the vaccine. So according to Safeway Pharmacy, what they're telling me is public health for each county will tell the manufacturer how much vaccine to release to that county, earmarked for that group of people. And then Safeway will go to, and what will happen is, like, Moderna will transport it to Safeway, and then Safeway will notify us. Apparently you can use all different kinds of different pharmacies, whatever that you want to, that are approved to dispense the virus. One of the things that was really, really cool today, and I'm probably all over the place, scattered in my thoughts right now, is that I was forwarded an email for people that live in San Luis Obispo County, where that public health has sent out a tool where they're asking for people's names, and they're asking for your address and tentative dates, and are you going to get the virus? Are you going to get the vaccine, or are you not going to get the vaccine, or you're not sure you're going to get the vaccine? It seems like they're coordinating it. Public health in San Luis Obispo County is actually reaching out to people that are in the next tier, kind of getting them organized. It does take a lot of organization, and Safeway has said to us that they are willing to do all kinds of different things if they want, because STEP is spread out, all over Northern California. We have folks that we support in Santa Rosa, but also up in Yuba City and here in Sacramento. And they said, if you want to do a big group thing in one setting where people schedule online their 15-minute window, and if you want to do drive-throughs to the parking lot where the nurses and pharmacists are out there dispensing in the cars, or you want to set up an area, if people have that, we can do that kind of coordinated effort. If you want to, like our flu vaccines every year, they give us a voucher that we share with the employees that work as far away as Santa Rosa, and all they have to do is take that voucher and walk into their local Safeway or Albertsons pharmacy and get their vaccine there. So there's lots of different pieces, but what we're understanding right now is that we're kind of in a holding pattern, but we're going to make use of this time. I have the consent form. We're getting together information for people. We're trying to put together information, all different kinds of information. You know, one of the things that Kim touched on was being culturally sensitive to different groups. And we really, really feel that in order for people to make informed consent about whether or not they want to do this, that they need to hear from voices that are like their own. So we want to find people with developmental disabilities to talk to their peers about that. We want people, even to the point of where a group of people maybe that have CP want to talk about that, or people, you know. We also have lots of communication differences here. You know, STEP serves a large deaf population, and we want to make sure that the materials that they're reading and that they're getting are from deaf voices and people that you know they trust, and all kinds of things like that. So that's what we're spending our time on. We do have the consent form already. It's going out to conservators. It's we're just getting information out to people about what does it mean, answering all the questions that you guys have all had here today, and kind of breaking it down in the communication to where it's something that people could really grasp onto and make sense of what it is. So that's kind of where we are at this point. Obviously, we are connected to the regional centers. We're connected to CCLN and all these other different groups, and anything that we learn, we share with others. Because you know, we often say here at STEP to our employees and our employers, that's what we call consumers here. They're our employers, because if it wasn't for them choosing us, we wouldn't have a job. But we're not good until everybody's good. And so it's not just taking care of the employers or taking care of the employees, and their families, it's taking care of the community here. So that's what I have to share with you. So if there's any questions or concerns, I'm happy to hear them. I'm glad to see John Decker is here. He's going to be kind of my partner in crime. I poke him a lot because he's in the loop and he's in the know down at the regional center. So that's it.
Lynn, thanks so much. And I always have to point out that I love your poster, but that's on your wall behind you.
Well, I know, and I always see that too whenever we Zoom.
We can do it. Lynn, you really highlight some of the critical points in how an agency is going to make and enact a vaccination plan. It's really about education, first of all. And I think amplifying voices, like you mentioned, is just going to be so critical. I know that I'm getting tons of emails from our membership on, I've contacted our public health department, they're saying this. I've contacted our public health department, they're not saying this. One says we're in, one says we're out. It really needs to be an all-out effort from every person in our community to be advocating that we are prioritized. You know, in my email to DDS this morning, it was, you know, we know the risks to our community, to the population of people that we serve. We're seeing a spike in our community and the population that we serve and employ. It's critical that this happens, that we're prioritized and that the vaccines are happening all over the state, a statewide plan. So just really appreciative of sharing your efforts with us and encouraging everybody to, I know you're doing a lot, everybody, trying to stay afloat with test positives at your agency, but it really is going to take that outreach to your public health departments, to your regional centers, and to us, CCLN, to just really continue to message that out. So thank you so much, Lynn.
I think communication between all of us is critical. I think we're trying to open a combination lock, and when somebody finds one of the numbers, they need to share that with everybody else. And I'm no stranger to using whatever kind of networks that I have. Both of my younger sisters are pharmacists. My niece works at California Public Health, and they're gonna give me some information on the low, or I'm gonna choke them. So yeah, we're gonna figure out who it is that we have to talk to, and we want a step-by-step procedure.
Yeah.
About how we're going to do this. But right now, while we're waiting, we have the luxury of talking to people about the consent forms, talking to people about what it means to get it, what it means not to get it, and listening. Listening is going to be the biggest part, not just being a talking head and telling people, because you know our folks and you know our staff, they're just going to say yes because they think that's what we want them to do, but we really want them to feel good about it. You know, Ruth talked a little bit about a story I shared with her about being a 6-year-old kid lined up in the cafeteria to get my rubella vaccine. Only me and the other kids didn't know that, but all we could hear was crying and screaming at the front of the line. That was terrifying. And I don't want that feeling. I don't want anybody that we support or anybody that we employ to have that feeling. So there, Liz said her piece. All right, thank you.
Thanks again, Lynn. One question here, should we contact the public health department in our county for the vaccine? Yes, yes, and yes, right?
I think it helps. I think one of the things that was interesting that Safeway asked us specifically, and I had our finance department run it for me, was they wanted to know the number of employees and consumers that we had by county. Because my folks that are out in Sonoma County, their vaccines are going to come from Sonoma County. And my folks in Yolo, they're going to come from Yolo County and be released. So you may find, if you're an agency that supports people in all different counties, is that this group is this week and next week is another couple of groups. So we don't know yet, but let's be prepared for when it's our turn in line.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Lynn. So next up, we have 2 folks from Regional Center who's just going to talk briefly about Regional Center's efforts. There's John Decker and Camilla Houston. I think we are going to hear from Camelia. So if we can feature Camelia's screen and allow her to present, that would be great. And thanks so much for hanging in with us this long, guys.
Absolutely. And thank you, Mark. And I also agree with Lynn. I poked John as well. Worked with John for some time here at the Regional Center. And he's a great resource and knowledgeable man and a pleasure to work with. Great colleague. I also just want to say thank you, Mark, for the invitation. So much valuable information presented today. And I appreciate every presenter and everything that was presented. And Kim Mills, I just want to say you underscore exactly what it's like for me, my household personally, and with my friends and in my immediate community. And I think that needs to be stated, and it's back to personal choice. And people do have varying views on this. I do want to underscore it's not mandatory, and there are mixed views on receiving the vaccine. So again, thank you. And I'm just going to highlight a couple things. I do want to say that we also have been sharing in the advocating efforts, ARCA reaching out to the state, and then we at Alta California Regional Center then sent a letter to our individual counties' public health officers. And we have 10 counties at Alta. And I'm going to attempt to see if I can share my screen briefly. Bear with me for just a moment. Sorry, give me 20 seconds here. I am not totally adept at this. Let's see.
Do you have a share screen button down at the bottom of your window for, oh, there we go.
You see it? You see the document? Yay! And I can see an interpreter, so thank you. This was a letter that was sent in early December. And again, this is the letter, this is the letter that I was just referencing. And I will show you, I'm gonna just scroll for a second so you can see what we did was attach ARCA's letter here to the state. And really just speaking to our clients having poor outcomes and with increased mortality rates. So what I did then was, well, we gathered the data in-house here from our different counties, and this is Sac County specifically with Dr. Kasiri, and highlighted the positive number of cases of COVID across the state of California and the number of deaths and what the percentage is, and then comparing that to regional centers, number of cases positive, how many deaths across the state, and then Alta California Regional Center specifically. And you can just see the increased percentage right there, definitely being at higher risk and increased mortality rates. I will say this data is outdated. Our numbers have increased. This is from December 7th. So it's a little bit higher now. So what we did was I sent the letter to each county officer with their particular county and our clients in that county, and highlighting, if you can see this information here, it says in Sacramento County, ACRC supports 16,837 children and adults. The majority live in their homes, but we also have 301 care homes in the county, and talked about just the increased risk there. So again, that was identified and individualized in each county, underscoring that we are advocating for the inclusion of our clients and consumers to be prioritized in the early phases. So we are sharing in the advocacy efforts there, and we've gotten really good responses. I would say I'm having more active communication with maybe five of the 10 counties. Alpine particularly gave us a particular contact to use separate from the public health officer. I know there's been some questions raised about reaching out to the officers, and I would say yes, and refer people to the website, and I'll show you something else that we shared with that information. And the officers can tell you if they want to designate someone else to get more information about the vaccine. But Alpine gave us a particular person's information, and we were able to pass that on to the clients in that area, so they could have direct contact there to get more information. I know that I've gotten varying responses, but the bottom line is we are in the first tier. Excuse me, that's my phone. We're in the first tier. I'm going to see if I can close this out for just a second, the screen sharing. Oops. Okay. We are in the beginning phases. Sacramento County confirmed that they received the vaccine just this week. And so it sounds like across the counties, they're all in planning phases right now. I was just sent a survey today from Sutter County. They have reached out to the facilities in Sutter and Yuba counties specifically, and what their planning is that they've sent these surveys to the care providers. And I think what's important to note, they're trying to tease out most appropriate for testing, or vaccinating. So total number of staff who fall into phase 1, and they send information of what that means, what meets that definition. Also phase 1A staff who are interested in the COVID vaccine, again, giving that choice factor that we've been talking about today. They also indicated number of residents interested in the vaccine, again, not mandated, but who's interested in with the efforts to move forward in it. So it's a good start. The wheels are turning. We're moving forward. I appreciate Lynn spoke to the consent form. She mentioned that, and working with Safeway and Albertsons, and she has shared that, and that was helpful for us as well. Internally, we've developed a database for our clients, specifically in the residential care, because that is right now who is being targeted across our counties, those who are in care homes. And specifically, like Sac County has 301. So there's efforts starting with that. But what we have to do, and we've just done, created a database internally to support our service coordinators in working with the residential care providers regarding any clients who cannot give informed consent, who are not conserved, who need support, do not have any family members involved. We can offer support in that area as far as the medical consent is concerned. So we're working closely internally there. And actually, service coordinators just got notified today about the database and how to document some things so they can reach out to the care providers. So that's current status, like right now. Another thing I just wanted to mention is we did send a flyer out recently as well on our website And the letter that I just showed you is on our website. But the flyer that we just sent out to speaks of testing sites, because testing is ongoing, as well as the vaccination information per the different counties. So people can click, it's a one click, and you can take you directly to whatever county that you're interested in. And just checking my notes. So it has been shared that we are anticipating some more information to come further in the phases for like 1B and on, but I do appreciate Aaron sharing a link for continued advocacy. And because we'll be passing this on here. I'm also being contacted by different advocates. So I'll be passing that information on as well. But we still need the more voices heard to still advocate for our clientele that we serve. But I think what kind of underscoring what's been said, the more voices, the better. And we continue on as we filter. Our priority right now are the ones in our facilities, in our care homes, and then we'll filter next. So I think that's all I have right now, but I want to see if you wanted to ask if John had anything to add, because I know he's been involved in a tag team partner here with me.
Yeah, thanks so much, Amelia. Go ahead.
Real quick question. So obviously you guys saw the letter that went out to all of the public health officers in our 10 counties. ARCA has used that format and spread it out to all the regional centers in order to kind of mimic that with the public health officers that they work with throughout the state.
Right.
I wonder if they're, from this group, there's feedback on, the idea of regional centers sending a letter outlining the number of individuals receiving, like, for example, SLS within the specific county as well. Like I'm wondering about folks wanting to discuss that, looking at ILS, we start getting really, really large numbers. Not saying that it's not something that can be done, and I also understand that SLS and ILS are kind of looked at differently amongst different regional centers. So, I'm wondering about that idea, about the idea of identifying that we do have other folks that are receiving in-home care and support, and communicating that to our public health officers.
Well, and that's the concern I was going to have when you were speaking about care homes, is that once again, and that's why when Aaron has talked about, and we've been very clear around in-home support services, we are in the same category, and we get lost in that conversation where we're supposed to be treated the same as what you're looking at in a care home, but there's this strategy around CCLs and care homes once again, and you have the SLS community and the ILS community. So if you look at what they listed out as vulnerable communities in that 1B group, we're in the same category. So it's not care homes then SLS, it's care homes and SLS. So that's my concern. And that's the concern that I expressed to DDS this morning about, the providers within the network too. And I appreciate that the health is coordinated, and you guys have been so responsive, is that this is kind of having supported living being forgotten about. That was the phone call I made to Lynn once again, is saying, I feel like as an SLS community, and when you talk to DDS, is that we kind of get pushed to the side, and you have a community hanging on by a thread right now. If you look, and you will see comments from Debbie Davis, who serves very medically fragile folks. I think the confusion for our community has always been, they don't understand the people that receive supported living services. There are folks with very complex needs that people have hunkered down for so long. So we need to make sure that it's not a after, it's a with. That community care homes are a with and not an after. You know what I mean?
So I think a commitment that we could make is, because we can certainly run lists of our clients based on the counties that they reside in. And Alta's a little different. Like there's 10 counties that we serve. No other regional center has that many different people that they have to reach out to. Granted, some of our counties only have a few folks in it, but we can absolutely do a list, and my idea would be, we do a run of how many clients are served within their county, and then we identify which agencies are serving those clients within the county. Does that make sense? So like a letter would be like, hey, this is what this type of care looks like. And in your county, we're serving 450 people in Sacramento County, let's just say, with SLS. And here's the agencies that serve those individuals, like listing all of those different agents. Like that's a pretty easy, low hanging fruit type thing to do, because it's just pulling the information out of our database. So Camelia and I can talk more about that because she's already done like all these, interactions with the public health officers, and I only know like a few of them. And so let's talk about that a little bit more, Camelia, next week, because I can pull the numbers out of our database. And but I think identifying those agencies by name, like who, which agencies are the ones, and addresses and phone numbers and all that stuff, I think will be important, because there's no other connection that public health is going to have. There's not a CCL database for SLS agencies. So we'd really want to make sure that we can get that. So that is a commitment I think that we at Alta can make. And we can certainly encourage our peers throughout the other regional centers.
And we, CCLN, would love to share that with other regional centers and their memberships too, because I think that's a big fear you're hearing from the a lot of providers, is saying they don't know what the coordinated plan is for their regional center to make sure that we are in the and not an after conversation. That was kind of why I sent the kind of urgent email to DDS to say, I don't want us to get, I want to make sure we have informed consent and it's very person centered, but I also don't want us to be an afterthought in this public health crisis on vaccinations. And I know that you guys have taken a really strong lead, John, and I really appreciate, that's why when I told Mark, I said, I'd really like to have Alta California Regional Center speak on it, because Alta has been very responsive and such a great partner. And I'm not just saying this because I don't say stuff that's nice very often.
And I just think it's so critical to hear, your efforts from Alta, but that you're also sharing it with other regional centers. There's 21 of us where, CCLN is statewide, and they're not necessarily having the same experience in communications with their regional center as you folks are at Alta. So really appreciate that outreach that you're doing to other regional centers as well.
Thank you very much. And again, the tone is set by our executive director, who was a service provider for many years. And he's the one that talked to Camelia and I about getting a letter out to all of the public health officers. And so he kind of set the ball rolling on it. I will just add, and I know you guys are running out of time. When you look at this letter next week, don't be surprised if you also see that I've included family home agencies in it as well. So, because they are also ones that are not thought of. And so we would love to have that be considered too. And then obviously we have much smaller group of family home agencies that we can include on our letter.
And then of course, families, large percentage of the IDD population lives with their families. So lots of outreach and advocacy to do. We have 3 minutes left and we need to be conscious of our interpreters, but I do see that Connie Lapin has a question again. Connie, do you want to unmute? You just need to unmute yourself.
Oh, are you asking me? Because my question, I'm sorry, I have 20 things going on at the same time, but I love this, and I'm so grateful for the transparency, because we're not in, it's not everybody competing, it's everybody joining together, and oh my God, does that feel good. Mm-hmm. So I just raised the question about, what about, let's say you have a pharmacy, but they won't allow people that don't wear masks to get the vaccine. And we contacted our pharmacy just to see what, I mean, they don't have it either. I mean, we're in the same predicament as everybody else, but they said, oh no, we cannot, it's against our rules. So I just want to add that. And I know you know about it. And Jackie, thank you for this. I mean, thank you all for this. I could give you all a non-distance hug, but it's something to consider, because all of a sudden that's a factor that stops that person from getting it. Yeah, right.
So true. Yeah. And I know that was part of Aaron's presentation, was talking about how to get vaccines in the home. So hopefully more to come on that. Definitely.
Well, I cannot wait for the bias to go away. And I know it's not because people are being mean. It's because they're restricted in large congregate areas. But hang on. And as you said, most people are at home with their families.
Yeah.
So thank you. The relationship with the pharmacy, Connie, and that's one of the things that when Lynn was talking to Safeway and trying to figure that out, is them willing to come out and do a drive-by, right? So that if you have a person with autism that is really, it's not going well, so they've been open to doing a drive-by vaccination if necessary. So that partnership, and it's been nice because when Lynn called John, he would talk to the Safeway pharmacy for us as well. So I think that's some of those things that maybe we could put together. It'd be a really good conversation to put together to pharmacies to say, drive-bys and at the home and what are all the other.
Yeah, there's also a big initiative at the DDS level for home testing and transportation companies to go around and pick up those tests and deliver them to labs. So I imagine there's lots more to come on where to get vaccines and how to get them. I mean, where to get tests and how to get tests and vaccines as well. So I want to thank our interpreters very much for your support. I want to thank STEP for funding the interpreters for this event. Thank you so much. I want to give a big shout out to my former agency, Toolworks, because I see so many of you here in the room and it's just nice to see your name. So thank you. And thank you for everybody that joined us today. More to come on all this, and appreciate all of our presenters for joining us in this event today. So thanks so much, everybody. Stay safe, be well, have a happy holidays. Stay safe at home for the holidays, please. And we'll hopefully all get through this with some hope in sight. So thanks so much, everybody. And we wish you all safe and well and a happy holidays. Bye-bye from CCLN.
Bye-bye.